Ever wonder what it is like to treat a global masterpiece as mere bathroom wallpaper? For most people, a Picasso is a lifelong dream. For me, it is just clutter in the attic. I am the heir to a family fortune spanning 5,000 years of relentless accumulation. My ancestors did not just collect art, they gave charity to starving painters who later became legends. In my house, the world's most precious history is just a collection of dusty old magazines. Up until now, I have been navigating the chaos of suddenly possessing unimaginable wealth. From buying social media giants to crashing markets, I have started to make the world notice me. But the struggle is real because I have a mission to spend money at an impossible scale. Today, I just wanted a quiet, romantic date with Lu Yiyao at a world-class art exhibition. Of course, some arrogant elites decided to mistake my modesty for poverty and started mocking me. They laughed at my clothes while I stood there holding the keys to a Koenigsegg. So, I decided to give them a shock that would leave their jaws hitting the floor. Why waste time bidding on one painting when you could just buy every single piece for sale? We are talking about a casual transaction of $490 billion US. My nannies and drivers need new murals in their rooms, and the toilets are looking a bit empty. The world thinks I am insane, but I am just getting started with my shopping spree. Let us dive into the recap and see how I broke the art world in a single afternoon. I stood at the entrance of the art exhibition where people were practically swooning over how casually I handle my money. Once I had secured my spot in the top 5, I decided to stop paying. I'm rich, but I'm not senseless. One guy got annoyed that I stopped spending, but I just didn't see the point in wasting more money on him. As Lu Yiyao and I finally entered the venue, I noticed the crowd whispering about the legendary boy who scatters money. The place was absolutely packed, filled with world-famous paintings that looked like they were ripped straight out of an art textbook. Yiyao asked why I was even interested in art. Truthfully, my own painting skills are a complete and utter disaster. She explained that music and fine arts are connected, and she began admiring the immense historical value of the Renaissance works. To most people, these are priceless treasures. To me, they are basically the same as the wallpaper in my house. My family has a 5,000-year legacy. For my ancestors, this celebrated history was just a part of their daily lives. I mentioned that the exhibition was nice, but probably not as impressive as the private library I have at home. Yao was confused about how anyone could have a home library like that, so I decided to give her some examples. I told her that while the world knows a few thousand Picasso paintings, I have thousands more piled up in my library. I don't even understand his art. To me, some of those paintings look like ghosts, but they just take up space. She was stunned. She started doing the math and realized those paintings alone were worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Then I brought up Van Gogh. One of my ancestors bought over 1,200 of his pieces when he was still unknown. I even have a massive version of Starry Night in my bedroom that cost my ancestor only 80 yuan back then. My ancestor didn't actually want the art. He just felt bad that Van Gogh was starving and wanted to help him survive. I sighed and told her it is a family tradition. We have always loved doing charity work for struggling artists. I just kept the paintings because I didn't want to be disrespectful by throwing them away, not knowing their actual value. Yao looked at me in disbelief. In her eyes, this wasn't charity. It was the most profitable investment in human history. I was walking through the art exhibition with Lu Yiyao, just taking in the atmosphere and the incredible works. Suddenly, I noticed that some of the paintings had price tags with a long string of zeros attached to them. Lu Yiyao explained that some private collectors were taking this opportunity to sell their masterpieces for a high price. To most people, those prices were astronomical, but to me, they looked like a great way to complete my task. I need to spend $1,000 billion, and spending millions on art seemed like a very efficient strategy. I told Lu Yiyao that my nannies, drivers, and chefs needed some better murals to decorate their bedrooms. I even mentioned that the public toilets in my house were looking a bit plain and needed some world-famous art. Lu Yiyao looked at me like I was completely insane for wanting to put masterpieces in a staff bathroom. I just laughed it off, telling her that I wasn't crazy, I was simply suffering from a case of lovesickness. Because the venue was so crowded, a few people nearby overheard my conversation and started judging me. A fat woman and a greasy man began whispering, calling me a poor student who was just bragging to impress a girl. Their sarcasm was loud and clear, and I decided it was time to give them a little reality check. I accidentally let my car keys slip, and the Koenigsegg logo flashed brilliantly under the exhibition lights as they hit the floor. The crowd immediately noticed the keys, and whispers started spreading about whether they were real or just a fancy lighter. Lu Yiyao gave me a look that clearly asked if I had done that on purpose, but I played it off as an accident. Before the skeptics could decide, a group of fans recognized me despite my mask and different outfit. Once my identity as Zhang Menglong was revealed, the atmosphere shifted instantly from mockery to absolute admiration. The greasy man who had just been insulting me suddenly started praising my taste and my incredible achievements. It was honestly boring to see how quickly people change their tune when they realize who they are talking to. I didn't care about their fake compliments. I just wanted to settle my shopping list and get moving. I cleared my throat and asked the crowd for the organizer's contact, announcing that I was buying every single painting for sale. The crowd erupted the moment I spoke. They couldn't believe I actually claimed I wanted to buy every single piece here. People started whispering, calculating the cost of thousands of paintings. Some estimates hit hundreds of billions of US dollars. Lu Yiyao looked at me with a pale face. She knew I was rich, but this was on another level entirely. To be honest, I was thrilled. I wasn't afraid of spending money, I was actually afraid I couldn't spend it fast enough. Lu Yiyao asked me what the point was, since I didn't even know how to appreciate this kind of high art. I told her my plan. I will build a massive museum at Jiangnan University of Technology and make admission completely free. It was a win-win. The art gets displayed, and my university's prestige skyrockets, helping us compete with the top schools. She joked that I was living my life like a game of Minecraft. I had to admit that description was spot on. Soon, the organizer, a man named Bruce, approached us. He seemed polite, though he was clearly just a corporate employee. Bruce asked which piece I was interested in. I didn't hesitate and told him I wanted every single one for sale. He was stunned. In all his world tours, he had never met someone who wanted to buy an entire exhibition at once. Bruce informed me that there were over 4,000 works left, with a total value of nearly $500 billion. He saw my eyes widen and assumed I was finally backing down, thinking no one on earth had that much liquid cash. But I just started laughing. I was actually disappointed that I initially thought it would only cost $200 billion. The people around us were baffled. They realized I wasn't shocked by the price tag, I was genuinely happy about it. Bruce was practically vibrating with excitement. He couldn't believe I actually wanted to buy over 4,000 paintings at once. I told him to make the arrangements immediately. I could see the shock written all over his face. Around me, the crowd was buzzing. They were reeling from the fact that I was spending nearly $500 billion. They started comparing me to the richest men in the world, wondering how I had so much liquid cash available. To them, spending a fortune on paintings is insane, but for me, it is just another day. Then, I spotted the Mona Lisa. I looked at it and wondered if that one was for sale too. I simply felt like one of the walls in my living room was a bit too empty for my liking. The crowd was losing their minds. They couldn't imagine a national treasure being used as a simple wall hanging. Bruce explained that the painting was priceless and simply couldn't be sold. I felt a genuine sense of disappointment. If I could buy it, I would be much closer to completing my mission and entering that mysterious academy. Eventually, Bruce returned with the final tally. The total came to $492.26 billion. He tried to be generous and offered me a discount, bringing the price down to $490 billion. I stopped him immediately. I do not do discounts. I prefer the original price or even paying more. People watching the live stream were stunned, though some seemed to already recognize my wild spending habits. With a quick check of my phone, Hong Yi confirmed that the transfer was being handled as we spoke. Instead of taking the discount, I decided to round the payment up to a clean $500 billion. Bruce was trembling. He had never seen anyone treat such a massive sum of money so casually in his life. As I walked away, I could hear the internet erupting. To me, this is all just a basic operation. After spending a fortune to buy every painting in the exhibition, the shock on the foreigners' faces was absolutely priceless. Even the crowd around me felt a surge of pride seeing someone finally put these arrogant people in their place. Bruce, who had been so aloof before, was now practically bowing to me. I told him the delivery details would follow. But the mood shifted quickly when I heard a commotion nearby. A European staff member was shouting at some visitors. It was an elderly professor from Yanjing University of the Arts and his students, begging for just a few more minutes. The man was heartless, using the exhibition rules as an excuse to insult them and call them thick-skinned. Hearing those insults in English, my expression darkened. I could not believe this was happening on our own land. The surrounding crowd was furious, but the moment security arrived, most people fell silent out of fear. The staff member, a man named Clark, sneered at them, calling the Chinese people a group of cowards. I had seen enough. I stepped forward, my presence immediately catching the attention of everyone in the room. Bruce rushed over, terrified that I might be offended. He knew exactly how much money was on the line. He hissed at Clark to shut up, warning him that I was a guest who had just saved their business. Clark was annoyed, but he feared his boss more than he hated us. He tried to play it off with a smile. Even then, he could not help but be arrogant, claiming that European art was the most splendid in the world. The old professor looked devastated, his pride wounded. I could not let this arrogant man walk away so easily. As Clark turned to leave, I reached out and stopped him. I asked him if he really thought this was the end. I had seen enough. This guy, Clark, thought he could look down on us just because he had some status. He was incredibly arrogant, treating our culture like a joke. I told him plainly that he was in China now. In my country, we welcome friends, but we have zero tolerance for discrimination and blatant arrogance. An old man tried to stop me, thinking I was just causing trouble, but I explained the real issue. Clark hadn't just broken a rule. He had insulted the very spirit and dignity of the Chinese people. Once the crowd and my livestream viewers heard the truth, the tide turned. They were finally on my side. Even then, Clark didn't know when to stop. He called me a skinny monkey and laughed in my face. That is when his boss, Bruce, stepped in. He looked like he had just seen a ghost. Bruce screamed at Clark, revealing that I had not just bought one painting, but over 4,000 of them. $500 billion. That was the price of my collection, and Bruce knew Clark had just ruined it. Suddenly, Clark's face changed. In his world, money is everything, and I had just become his god. But I was not interested in his fake apology. I could see right through their greed and hypocrisy. I told them that our 5,000 years of history makes their so-called Renaissance look like a footnote. I did not want their exhibition here anymore. I told them to take their masterpieces and get out. Bruce tried to hide behind a legal contract, but I did not care about the fine print. I was more than happy to pay the liquidated damages just to see them scrubbed from this building. I called Hong Yi immediately and told him to find out who manages the convention center. I did not just want them gone now. I wanted their entire world tour blocked in every single country. Hong Yi promised it would be handled. The crowd around me was buzzing, realizing the scale of my power. I looked at the stunned foreigners and gave them one final order: pack your bags and leave. I wanted to show Bruce what real power looks like, but first, let us look at the Cheryl Group in Paris. They are a global titan of art and design, headquartered in a gorgeous building on the famous Champs-Élysées Avenue. Right now, they are managing a massive world art tour featuring masterpieces like the Mona Lisa and earning billions in profits. Their CEO, Zhang, knows that the world is more complex than it seems, especially when it comes to my home, Huaxia. He was explaining to his assistant, Audrey, that Huaxia is a mysterious place with depths that most people cannot fathom. Zhang recalled a legendary auction from 1999, where a single young man from Huaxia completely dominated the European market. This man did not just buy art, he outbid every European in the room simply because someone insulted the Chinese people. He spent an astronomical amount of money, proving that official wealth lists like Forbes are often just for show. But while Zhang was reminiscing about the past, the present crashed down on him in the form of a phone call. Audrey's face turned pale as she informed him that every single venue for their global tour was terminating their contracts. Not only were the venues gone, but the liquidated damages had already been paid back to the Cheryl Group's account. When Audrey mentioned that the Bradley family was behind the cancellations, Zhang looked like he had seen a ghost. In Europe, the Bradley family is an entity of absolute power, capable of making or breaking any government or business. Zhang was terrified, desperate to find out which of his employees had offended such a formidable and secretive dynasty. Little did he know, the cause of his nightmare was a simple interaction with me at the Gusu International Convention Center. Back at the exhibition, Bruce was still trying to figure out how to handle me when his own world collapsed. A staff member rushed in, panicking, announcing that the center had canceled their cooperation and ordered them to leave immediately. They were given only 30 minutes to clear out all their people in art, or they would be forcibly expelled. Bruce was speechless, wondering how I could possibly influence a government-run facility so quickly and decisively. I just smiled to myself, knowing that my family's 5,000-year legacy is about far more than just a pile of gold. The crowd was in shock. They expected me to just throw money at the problem, but I chose a much more direct approach. By using my connections to shut down an international exhibition, I showed everyone that my influence goes far beyond simple wealth. People started comparing me to Wang Ling, realizing that while he is rich, my background and power are on an entirely different level. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The onlookers began cheering, delighted to see these arrogant organizers finally get a taste of their own medicine. I looked at them coldly and told them to pack up. I made it clear that insulting Chinese culture would have extreme consequences. Bruce tried to play it off as a misunderstanding, desperate to save the brand effect of their tour for the sake of their boss. But Clark remained arrogant, claiming that other countries would be begging to host them if they couldn't do it in China. I couldn't help but laugh at his ignorance. I told him he still didn't understand the scale of the situation he was in. The staff member then delivered the crushing blow. Every single one of their planned future partners had already canceled their cooperation. The look on their faces was priceless. They realized I hadn't just kicked them out of the city but had effectively blacklisted them globally. Just then, Bruce's phone rang. It was their big boss, Mozank, and he was absolutely furious about the collapse of the tour. Mozank demanded a cross-border video call to speak with me personally. I folded my arms, ready to see what he had to say. The moment the video connected, Mozanki froze. He stared at me with a look of utter disbelief and shock. He saw a resemblance between me and a powerful Chinese man he had known 20 years ago. The similarity was uncanny. His entire demeanor changed. He went from being an angry CEO to someone who was suddenly terrified and incredibly cautious. He apologized profusely for the rudeness of his staff. I was confused why such a powerful man was suddenly so afraid of me. I told him I didn't care about his personal apology. I wanted a sincere apology to the Chinese people and our civilization. Mozank agreed immediately and ordered Bruce to deal with Clark. The punishment he handed down was swift and brutal. Clark was stripped of his position and ordered to go to a coal mine in Africa to perform the hardest manual labor. To make matters worse, he was forced to memorize ancient Chinese texts every day, or his time in the mines would be extended. Clark collapsed on the floor, completely broken. He finally learned that some people are simply too powerful to provoke. Clark was finally taken away, and at my request, the entire exhibition was forced to shut down. As the staff began clearing the works, the once lively hall fell into a heavy, oppressive silence. The crowd didn't leave immediately. They were staring at the empty walls with a sense of profound loss. I noticed an elderly professor from IART University. He looked devastated, as if he had lost a lifelong dream. For people like him, this wasn't just about culture, it was a rare chance to see true masterpieces. While some felt resentment toward me, they could not speak up because I was defending our national integrity. Lu Yiyao pulled on my sleeve, whispering that the people were disappointed. I realized she was right. In my excitement to expose Clark, I had completely ignored the genuine art lovers in the room. Hearing the crowd lamenting that they would never see the Mona Lisa, I knew I had to do something. I grabbed the microphone and shouted for everyone to wait. I was not letting them leave unhappy. I admitted my mistake and then made a bold claim. I would hold my own art exhibition right here. People were skeptical. They wondered if my recent purchases could possibly compare to a world-class event. I just laughed. I told them my collection was 10 times better, with several works surpassing the Mona Lisa. I had already arranged for my private jet to airlift my pieces from Jiangnan City. They would be here soon. To make amends, I promised everyone a free lunch. Most people expected some basic, mediocre takeout. But as noon approached, a rich aroma of cumin and vanilla began to waft through the air. Suddenly, a fleet of luxury dining cars arrived, bearing the logos of the world's most exclusive restaurants. I had summoned Norma, Mana, and Daco Cuisine. These are brands usually reserved for the global elite. The crowd was stunned. They realized the lunch I provided cost thousands of dollars per person. From golden caviar to truffles and king crab, the food was a feast beyond their wildest dreams. Some even spotted a $25,000 ice cream sundae. The atmosphere shifted from disappointment to pure awe. As they indulged in the luxury, I knew this was just the beginning of showing them what true art is. I handed Lu Yiyao a glass of pomegranate juice, watching her react to the unique and rich taste of the fruit. I told her these were blood-colored pomegranates from the Ural Mountains, airlifted specifically for her just this morning. She was stunned, realizing she was essentially drinking money, but I didn't mind. If she liked it, I'd go anywhere. Lu Yiyao questioned if spending $500 billion on paintings just enriched the Europeans too much. I laughed it off. She didn't realize that a huge portion of Europe's economy indirectly works for me. I explained that the money was just moving from one of my pockets to another. It didn't hurt my bottom line. To her, it sounded unbelievable, but for me, it was just the reality of how my assets are structured. Meanwhile, the square was filled with people enjoying a world-class feast I had provided for everyone in the city. Social media was blowing up with photos of king crab and luxury food, all provided by me for free. Some people joked that they were picking the wool of capitalism, but to me, it was just a bit of dander. As we discussed dinner, a sudden thunderous roar filled the air, drawing everyone's attention toward the sky. A massive formation of 24 CH-40K transport helicopters descended, creating a spectacle that stopped the city in its tracks. People quickly searched online, discovering these rare, retired helicopters had been bought by a mysterious rich man years ago. They didn't need long to figure out that the mysterious man was me. The sheer scale of it was overwhelming. The helicopters landed, and a disciplined crew began unloading crates that looked antique, some even appearing weathered and old. Just then, a convoy of cars arrived, and a man in a suit approached me to signal the start. We began opening the crates, revealing a staggering array of priceless paintings, sculptures, and ancient calligraphy. The crowd was breathless, realizing my private collection far exceeded anything in the official exhibition nearby. This wasn't just a display of wealth. This was the real peak art exhibition, and I was the curator. I met a man named Cao Yushan. He explained that the Cao family manages my properties here in Suzhou. It turns out the Hong family has partnered with elite families in almost every city to ensure I am taken care of. Lu Yiyao was stunned by this, comparing my status to that of an emperor visiting his local magistrates. Then came the shipments. I met Zhang Yue, a disciplined former soldier who managed the transport of my collection. I made sure his team of veterans were well paid. It is only right that elite talent is treated with respect. When Zhang Yue mentioned 30,000 pieces of art, the crowd around us started whispering in total disbelief. They thought I was bragging or trying to fool them with worthless junk. I could feel their growing doubt. Zhang Yue silenced them by listing the masters, Wang Shiji, Yan Zhenqing, and Wu Daozi. The crowd gasped in shock. It did not stop there. We had thousands of works by Picasso, Van Gogh, and even lost pieces by Da Vinci. The staff joked that these treasures had just been gathering dust. To them, this was just a routine cleaning. I had already secured a pavilion through the Ministry of Culture, making it a permanent home for these works. An old professor approached me, eager to see the art, though I jokingly referred to them as white garbage. He was horrified by my lack of reverence, but his anger turned to pure ecstasy once he saw the paintings. The venue transformed from a deserted space into a lively hub of shock as people discovered the Picassos. The professor practically collapsed when he spotted a lost Da Vinci painting missing since the 18th century. I let him dive into a box containing several other Da Vinci works, watching his excitement reach a fever pitch. But then I noticed something strange. There were 7 different versions of the Mona Lisa in that one box. I asked Lao Cao if we had fakes in my collection. I could not imagine having imitations in my house. Lao Cao answered with a claim that left us all speechless. He said every Mona Lisa in the world is an imitation, even the famous one in the Louvre. That revelation shook everyone to their core. I could see the absolute shock on everyone's faces. They couldn't believe the claim that the Mona Lisa in the Louvre was a replica. I was just as confused. I knew my family's collection was authentic, but calling the world's most famous painting a fake seemed wild. Then Cao Yushan stepped in with a laugh. He explained that to understand this, we had to look at my own family background. Apparently, Leonardo da Vinci didn't just paint one Mona Lisa, he actually created 12 of them over his lifetime. 4 were destroyed by the master himself, 1 sits in the Louvre, and the other 7 have always been in my family's possession. But then Cao dropped a bombshell. He claimed that even Da Vinci's works were technically imitations of an even older original painting. The crowd erupted. Art historians and students were outraged, feeling their entire understanding of history was being challenged. To settle the dispute, a young art student stepped forward. He wanted to examine the pieces for himself. He noted the poplar wood and the fading technique, confirming they matched the high standards of the Louvre's masterpiece. Using a magnifying glass, he found the LV initials in the eye, but noticed something strange on the arch bridge. He checked the other paintings and found different numbers on the bridges, 1, 3, 4, and 5. It suddenly clicked for him. These weren't random codes, but serial numbers Da Vinci gave himself as he perfected the work. The room went silent as the realization hit. We were looking at 7 genuine Da Vincis, a discovery that would shake the art world. But the mystery remained. If these were all copies, who was the original artist that Da Vinci was imitating? Cao smiled mysteriously and pointed to the letters hidden in the painting's left eyes. He translated the Italian phrase for us, El Grande Signor Zhang. It translated simply to, a tribute to the great Mr. Zhang. I stood there in shock. It seems my family's influence reached back much further and deeper than I ever imagined. The crowd was skeptical, questioning how a Chinese painter from the 16th century could be related to the famous Mona Lisa. I was stunned, but given what I know about my family background, I couldn't bring myself to doubt Cao Yushan. I wondered if this was linked to that mysterious academy. Maybe they taught my ancestor the art of painting there. Suddenly, I felt a surge of frustration. I have $1 trillion to spend, but it just keeps coming back. I slammed the table in annoyance, which actually hurt my hand. Lu Yiyao looked at me like I had lost it. I told her I was just stressed about my money, which earned me a very judgmental look from her. Then, Zhao Yushan brought out the works of my ancestor, stored in a box that looked incredibly luxurious and expensive. He explained that the box was virtually indestructible, capable of withstanding temperatures up to 5,000 degrees. I couldn't believe technology like that existed 500 years ago, but my family has always been ahead of its time. With a few taps, the box opened with a mechanical precision that put modern engineering to shame. I felt a renewed determination to uncover the secrets of the Academy. This was far beyond anything I imagined. Inside was a version of the Mona Lisa that left everyone in the room absolutely breathless. People were shocked that the painting felt alive, with eyes that followed you even from behind the canvas. Unlike Da Vinci's version, this smile was vivid and moving, making the figure feel like a real person. Tao Yushan told us my ancestor, Zhang Jingji, painted this at 21 and refused to sell it to nobles. The most insane part was that Leonardo da Vinci begged for 3 days and nights just to borrow the painting. It turns out my ancestor even gave da Vinci some pointers, essentially helping the great master find his own path. I took Lu Yiyao through the brand new exhibition, listening as Chao Yushan revealed the true depth of my family legacy. It turns out my ancestors weren't just wealthy, they were masters of sculpture and music, even guiding legends like Beethoven and Mozart. For some reason, the family kept this brilliance hidden from the world, known only to a tiny, elite inner circle. As tourists shared these stories online, I became a sensation again. Some people doubted it, but I didn't really care. Around 5 o'clock, we left the exhibition center. I had promised to treat Lu Yao's roommates to a lavish dinner tonight. Yao started teasing me, saying my ego was reaching the sky. I told her it was just the Zhang family way. I joked that I had prepared some bribes to win over her roommates, hoping they might even kick her out. Curious, she opened a small box in the car. Inside were 3 real estate certificates and 3 Maserati car keys. I chose the city center for the properties. Combined, the houses and cars were worth tens of millions of dollars. Yao was speechless. She pointed out that maintenance and gas for those cars would be a nightmare for college students. I realized my mistake immediately. I promised to send over unlimited fuel cards and lifetime maintenance plans the next day. Just in case they didn't like the houses, I showed her my plan B, stunning gemstone necklaces and earrings. Each piece was worth millions. I was confident that no one in the world could refuse gifts of that magnitude. Suddenly, Yao's tone shifted. She asked if I thought she was just a materialistic girl who only liked me for money. I stopped the car, surprised by her reaction. I realized my new wealth was starting to change how people saw me. I laughed and reminded her that she stayed by my side back when I was just a broke, poor student. I told her that while I am rich now, I am still the same person she can just hang out with. The tension vanished, and we went back to our usual bickering. She finally agreed to give me her roommates' numbers. Yao called her friend Tian to tell her we were coming, but the response she got was suddenly chilling. Jian told her they could not go. The reason was simple and terrifying: he was here again. I noticed Lu Yao's expression turned solemn in the rearview mirror. She tried to brush it off, but I knew something was wrong. She told me she could not have dinner because of a situation with her roommate, but I caught her slip. I pushed a bit, playing the role of the domineering president, and eventually she admitted the truth. It was her father. I knew Lu Yao's history, but hearing it again reminded me of the darkness she had survived alone for so long. Her father, Lu Yiyao, was a gambling addict who had terrorized her childhood and caused her mother to leave them. He had even physically harmed her in the past, leaving her hospitalized for a month. She had fought hard to escape. Through her musical talent, she had built a life of independence, finally finding peace during her college years. But now, the parasite had returned. He had lost everything and came to her school to bleed her dry again. I did not hesitate. I stepped on the gas, determined to get her back to the dormitory as quickly as possible. When we arrived, a crowd had already gathered. Her father was causing a scene, screaming for her to come down. He had seen the news about us online and realized I was wealthy. He saw her as a lottery ticket. Looking at the unkempt man, I felt a wave of anger. I could not imagine the pain Yiyao had endured. While she tried to remain patient, I contacted my assistant, Hong Yi, to get the full details on this man. Hong Yi confirmed the worst. The man was mentally unstable and owed over 100 million in foreign debts. I knew the school security could not handle a lunatic, so I arranged for professional help to be on the way. Seeing her tremble, I reached out and took her hand. It was the first time we had ever touched. I could feel her leaning into me, finding comfort in my grip as the students around us started gossiping. They whispered about her family shame, but I tightened my hold, letting her know I was not going anywhere. Lu Yiyao spotted us and immediately shifted his focus to me, demanding to know if we were together. I stepped in front of her, shielding her from his gaze, and firmly admitted that we were indeed in a relationship. The crowd gasped, but her father just laughed. He did not see a partner, he only saw a payday. He brazenly demanded a dowry of 500 million to give me his daughter. He was literally selling her. The people around us burst into laughter. They knew my wealth made that amount look like a total joke. 500 million? For someone like me, that was not a price. It was an insulting dowry. I stood there listening to Lu Yiyao's father, demand 500 million as a dowry to leave her alone. The people around us burst out laughing. To him, that amount was unimaginable, but to me, it was just a number. It was clear that Lu Yiyao viewed his own daughter as nothing more than a commodity to pay off his debts. Seeing the tears in Yiyao's eyes made my blood boil. No one should feel like a product to their own parent. I didn't hesitate. I had Hong Yi transfer the 500 million immediately to buy Yao her freedom and peace. But greed is a bottomless pit. The moment the money hit his account, Lu Yiyao's eyes lit up with pure avarice. He realized I had far more wealth than he imagined and immediately demanded another 500 million to truly disappear. He thought he had found a gold mine in me, intending to keep bleeding Yao dry for as long as possible. I realized a simple payment wouldn't solve this. I needed a permanent solution that wouldn't leave Yiyao feeling guilty. When my associate Cao Yushan arrived, I decided to give Lu Yiyao a place that would be a heaven for him. I ordered the construction of a private mental hospital, but with a very specific twist to keep him occupied. I told Cao to make the facility look exactly like a casino, complete with staff hired to gamble with him daily. He could spend the rest of his life as a fake god of gamblers, trapped in a gilded cage of my making. Lu Yiyao tried to resist, shouting about his Wing Chun skills, but my men handled him with effortless ease. As they dragged him away, I looked at Yiyao. I would do absolutely anything to ensure she never suffers again. After that scene with Lu Yiyao's father, I quickly dispersed the crowd. There was nothing left for them to see. Only Yao and her 3 roommates remained. I could tell she was still shaken and deeply upset by everything. Her friends were worried, and I wanted to make sure she felt supported and safe after such a public disaster. Since she wasn't in the mood for dinner, I decided to postpone it. Now was the time for a different plan. Her roommates had been her rock during her father's outbursts, and I couldn't let that kindness go unrewarded. I brought out some small boxes. I called them meeting gifts, but they were far more than just simple tokens. When they opened them, their expressions were priceless. They found real estate certificates and luxury car keys inside. Then came the diamond jewelry from an exclusive designer. Each piece was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. They were terrified at first, feeling the gifts were far too expensive for their spending power to handle. I explained that this was a small thank you for helping Yao when her father had stripped her of everything. To make it easier to accept, I joked that these were simply advanced bridesmaid gifts for a future wedding. Yao blushed and threatened me, but her roommates were already delighted and fully on board with the idea. With the bribes delivered, the girls' loyalty shifted instantly. They decided it was time for me to take over. They made up wild excuses about sisters visiting and suddenly claimed there was no room for Yiyao tonight. Before she could even react, they practically pushed her out the door and left her alone with me. Yao looked at me with complete helplessness. Her loyal friends had sold her out for a few luxury houses. With no way back into the dormitory, she had no choice but to come stay with me for the night. She gave me a playful warning, flashing those tiger teeth and telling me not to try anything funny with her. I just laughed it off. After everything today, we finally had some peace and quiet to ourselves. I brought Lu Yiyao to my 3-story villa, but she just stood there looking at the place in complete disbelief. I told her it might feel a bit crowded, though she pointed out that 200 square meters is hardly crowded. I offered her the place to stay if she wanted to live away from home, mentioning that Nanny was already informed. Then, I showed her the underground garage, where over a dozen luxury cars were parked in bright, feminine colors. From Ferraris to Lamborghinis, I had them all ready, wanting her to pick whichever one she liked the most. She was stunned, asking if I was trying to take care of her, especially since she didn't even have a license. I just shrugged it off, admitting that if I were to take care of anyone, it would definitely be her. Inside, the living room alone was as large as her entire former home, decorated with world-famous paintings on the walls. I explained the layout, with my room on the 3rd floor and hers on the 2nd, including a study and music room. I told her she could ring a bell for anything she needed, acting a bit like a landlord for a moment. Suddenly, Lu Yiyao gave me a wicked smile and suggested we have a shot while it was still early. My heart skipped a beat. We talked like this online, but facing her in person, the suggestion felt much more intense. I tried to act stern, telling her I wasn't that kind of person, even if I had helped her father out. Secretly, though, I was already thinking about the logistics and realizing I didn't have any protection ready on hand. Just then, a message from Cao Yushan popped up, mentioning some special items she had left in my bedside drawer. I felt a surge of confidence, thinking the timing was perfect, until Lu Yiyao showed me her phone screen. She wasn't talking about romance, she wanted to play a shooting game to practice her skills after the exams. I felt a mix of relief and embarrassment, then quickly pivoted to challenge her as the legendary Jiangnan gun god. We spent the next few hours in a fierce digital battle, laughing and arguing just like we did when we first met. By 9 o'clock we were exhausted. I told her to take a shower while I arranged for some late-night snacks. She realized she hadn't brought a change of clothes and looked embarrassed, complaining about how her family had kicked her out. I reassured her, explaining that my family owned private clothing studios with endless stock in every style and model. While she showered, the nanny delivered a set of incredibly soft, high-quality pajamas and seasonal clothes to the dressing room. As she finished up, I teased her from outside the door, telling her to dress warmly so I could hold it. She laughed and called me a weirdo, but I could tell she was finally starting to feel at home here. Living in the villa was great, but having Lu Yiyao here was a whole different level of challenge for me. She stepped out of the shower in these thin pajamas, and for a second, I honestly forgot how to breathe. I actually felt a nosebleed coming on and had to turn away quickly before I completely lost my composure. She just laughed at me, teasing me about being anemic while I scrambled for some tissues to stop the bleeding. We settled down for some barbecue and no tea, but the tension between us remained absolutely electric. In a moment of impulse, I pulled her close and pinned her to the sofa, my heart racing wildly. I could feel her heart beating just as fast as mine, and for a moment, the whole world vanished. I almost leaned in for a kiss, but she kicked me off just before I could make my move. We laughed it off, but then the conversation turned serious as we talked about our plans after graduation. Lu Yiyao wanted to pursue music, but I knew how brutal that industry could be for most struggling artists. I told her to come to Jiangnan City after she finished her studies because I wanted her by my side. I promised her that if she stayed persistent, I would personally pay for every single part of her dream. Whether it was top teachers or even buying a music platform, I had the resources to make it happen. She laughed, telling me I should leave some room for other singers to succeed on their own merit. Still, she agreed to move to Jiangnan City to find me once her graduation thesis was finally done. I felt a wave of relief and joy knowing that she would be with me in the near future. Before bed, we got into some playful banter about who would sleep on which floor of the villa. I teased her about providing any service she needed, which predictably ended with her chasing me around. Once I finally settled into bed, I checked my phone and saw I was all over the trending searches. Netizens had started digging into my family history, though they only found the superficial, public details. Suddenly, a message popped up from my college dorm group. It was Shu Li, and he sounded completely panicked. He told me that one of our friends had been framed and that they desperately needed my help. I was just settling in when a call from my friend Shu Li interrupted my peace. He sounded completely panicked. He told me that our roommate's son Yuli was in deep trouble at his new internship at an internet company. Sun had been working on a high-stakes internet celebrity project, but things had gone horribly wrong for him. Someone in the company had leaked strategic plans to a competitor, and Sun was being used as the scapegoat. It was a dirty frame-up. Money had been planted in his account and incriminating files left on his computer. If these charges stuck, Sun was looking at 3 years in prison and a ruined reputation for the rest of his life. The company demanded 20 million yuan in compensation to drop the charges, a sum that was impossible for him to pay. I felt a surge of rage. Sun is the most honest guy I know, and this betrayal was absolutely unacceptable. I immediately called Hong Yi to secure the best legal representation that my family's massive fortune could possibly buy. Hong Yi mentioned lawyers from the legendary Nanxian Pizza Hut, elites who only survive through brutal internal competition. I ordered a full dossier on Nas Holdings Group. I wanted to know every single secret they were hiding. I decided to head back to Jiangnan City immediately. Whoever dared to frame my brother was about to learn a lesson. Just as I was fuming, a knock at the door revealed Lu Yiyao, looking as captivating as ever. She had heard me slam the table and came to check on me, her presence instantly calming my anger. I told her about the situation and that I had to leave for Jiangnan City much sooner than I planned. She warned me to be careful and not get dragged into the mess, though I knew I could handle it. Before I left, the atmosphere shifted. She stayed a while, and we shared a quiet and intimate moment together. I sat at the piano playing a sweet prelude while she sang for me, a song from when we first met. As the music filled the room, I felt a brief peace before the storm I was about to unleash. I woke up to see Lu Yiyao still fast asleep. Her peaceful face was almost too tempting to ignore. I spent the night on the sofa to keep things respectful, though I really didn't want to leave her side. But my old roommate, Sun Yuli, was in trouble. I left Lu Yiyao in Cao Yushan's care and rushed back to Jiangnan City. I headed straight to Na's Holdings. As soon as I entered, I could hear the employees gossiping about a scandal. They were talking about Yole, claiming he took a bribe and caused the company to lose 20 million yuan. It was disgusting. They were judging his character and his school without knowing the full story. Yule is a good man, but he is too introverted. He had no one to stand up for him in that Shark Tank. He had been framed by his supervisor, Wu Yun, who tricked him into accepting money and planted evidence on his PC. Yule's family are Tibetan nomads. For them, 20 million yuan is not just a debt, it is a life-ending catastrophe. When I arrived, the police were already there. Yulai looked defeated, his head low and his spirit broken. Then there was Wu Yun. He was acting the part of the disappointed mentor, pretending to be heartbroken over Yulai's betrayal. The hypocrisy was sickening. Wu Yun thought he had successfully sacrificed a naive intern to cover his own tracks. I stepped into the room with two sharp lawyers by my side. The atmosphere shifted instantly as people recognized me. Whispers broke out. They knew me from my online presence and wondered why Yulai would steal if he knew me. The police warned me that the evidence was unfavorable. Wu Yun chimed in, smugly mentioning the money in Yuli's account. I just laughed. A bribe of only 100,000 yuan? I wanted to know who they were actually insulting. I was standing there with the police, facing accusations that seemed impossible to shake off at the time. But then, my friend Zhang Menglong stepped in with a question that completely shifted the mood of the room. He asked the officer if a billionaire would ever risk their freedom for a measly $10,000 bribe. The officer laughed, agreeing that such a thing would be insane, but he reminded him I was just a student. That is when Zhang smiled and told everyone that I was actually a billionaire hiding in plain sight. I was completely bewildered. I had no idea where he was getting these wild ideas from or what he planned. To my shock, Zhang had lawyers present a property certificate for a massive villa in Jiangnan City. The document was in my name and the value was staggering, leaving the police and my coworkers absolutely speechless. Suddenly, the atmosphere changed. People who had looked down on me were now staring at me with pure awe. Zhang didn't stop there. He claimed my family owned half the cattle and sheep in the NMG grasslands. He even joked about how I pretended to be poor and lived a simple life just to fit in. My boss, Wu Yun, looked pale. He could not believe the student he underestimated was actually this wealthy. To prove it, the police decided to visit the villa, and Zhang even promised them a fleet of new cars. As we drove, Zhang whispered that I was now a billionaire landowner, whether I realized it or not. We arrived at a luxurious estate where a housekeeper greeted me with a deep and incredibly respectful bow. He mentioned golden caviar for my lunch, and I could only stare in confusion at this strange new reality. I arrived in my family villa with the police and the legal team from the Nas group trailing behind me. My butler greeted us at the door, and I could see the police officer's confidence waver just looking at the estate. As we walked in, the sheer scale of the property hit them. The garden alone was massive and meticulously kept. Once inside, we entered a living room that felt more like a luxury palace than a home, complete with gilded tiles. I noticed the police officer staring at a piece of calligraphy on the wall, written by the legendary Wang Shiji. When the butler mentioned it cost 12 million, the officer looked bewildered. The company's accusations started sounding completely ridiculous. Then came the refreshments. The butler offered a rare geisha coffee, delivered personally by the Duke of Windsor in Panama. Even my friend Zhang Menglong was shocked. This kind of coffee cost $350 per pound. The police officer, feeling out of place, just asked for water. He ended up with high-end Felix mineral water. I saw the legal counsel checking his phone, his hands shaking when he realized the water cost $200 a liter. It was becoming clear to them that a 10 yuan bribe was an absolute joke compared to my actual lifestyle. To drive the point home, the butler took them on a tour of the house to showcase the family assets. He pointed out vases once used by Zhu Yuanzhang and chopsticks from Emperor Qianlong, both worth hundreds of millions. Then there was a Michelangelo sculpture worth over 2 billion and a rare glass meteorite valued at 500 million. By the time we reached a painting by Master Rook, the officer was frantically taking notes, his mind completely numb. The butler casually mentioned that the total value of the items in the house was roughly $30 billion. We passed through my bedroom, which smelled of ambergris, a substance costing $300 per gram. Finally, the butler pointed out my bathroom, featuring an intelligent LV co-branded toilet priced at $19,000. He looked the officer in the eye and noted that 10 yuan is not even enough to buy a toilet. The police officer was completely broken. He realized that for someone in my position, money is just a number. He closed his notebook, feeling the suffocating scent of wealth, and promised to investigate the matter very carefully. Meanwhile, Wu Yun looked like he had just swallowed something bitter. He thought I was an easy target to frame. Instead, he realized he had not just made a mistake, he had accidentally stumbled right into a hornet's nest. Wu Yun's face was turning a shade of dark purple as he realized just how deep my pockets really are. He tried to frame me for taking a 10 yuan bribe, but the absurdity of the amount was honestly hilarious. My housekeeper pointed out to the police that accusing a billionaire of such a small bribe was a total insult. My lawyer didn't just defend me, he decided to sue Nas Holdings for the sheer insult of the accusation. The legal head of Nas Holdings was losing his mind. He had never heard of a tiny bribe being an insult. The police were equally stunned. Apparently, owning dozens of villas and flats in one city is a complete worldview shifter. Then my lawyer dropped a bombshell. After a quick search, he found something I didn't even know about myself. It turns out I own 52.9% of Nas Holdings. I am actually the boss of the company suing me. I looked at Zhang Menglong, and I could tell he was behind this. That guy always has a hidden plan. The logic was simple. Why would I risk my own massive company for a measly 10 yuan? It made no sense. Wu Yun was desperate. He tried to argue that the 10 yuan was property of unknown origin to keep me trapped. Zhang Menglong laughed in his face, mocking his lack of legal knowledge and his pathetic attempt to save himself. Suddenly, Wu Yun's phone buzzed. A notification showed that 100 million had just been deposited into his account. Before he could even react, Zhang Menglong grabbed the phone and reported him to the police for unexplained wealth. Just like that, the hunter became the prey, and Wu Yun's plan blew up in his face in the most expensive way. I watched as the police officer's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Wu Yun had just found 100 million. For a man with a modest salary, that kind of money is a death sentence when the police start asking questions. Panicked and desperate, Wu Yun tried to point the finger at me, claiming I was the one who planted the money. I just smiled. The police quickly discovered the account belonged to a homeless man, and the money trail led to Siberia. Wu Yun was speechless. He couldn't explain the funds, and I jokingly suggested he might have been selling state secrets. Just as he was spiraling, the police received a call. Lu Neng, the manager from Ruiz e-commerce, had just surrendered. But the real shock came when we arrived at the station. The lobby was packed with hundreds of Ruiz employees. All 341 of them had come forward to testify against Lu Neng and his bribery of Wu Yun. They brought everything. Surveillance footage and high-quality recordings that left absolutely no room for doubt or denial. The police were baffled. They couldn't understand why an entire staff would intentionally destroy their own company's reputation. I stepped forward with a smile. To them, it was simple. Most employees are just looking for a better paycheck. I paid every single one of them a bonus and offered them jobs at my Unicorn Group's second branch. I didn't just take down my enemies. I literally bought every single person in that company to do my dirty work. Sun Yuli could only watch in awe. In this world, money really is the ultimate tool for pushing the devil. The police finally cleared everything up. Wu Yun confessed to everything, and Sun Yulei is finally free from the injustice. Then the officers brought up that massive transfer of 100 million yuan I had sent to Wu Yun's account. I just played it cool and told them I had accidentally typed the wrong account number while sending the money. They didn't believe me, but there was nothing they could do since I refused to admit to any crime. When they asked where such a huge sum came from, I told them I sold crude oil from my African mine. The officer looked completely stunned. I guess having an oil mine makes me a superior man in their eyes. Then we got to the part about the donation I had mentioned earlier to the police department. I told them to just keep the 50 million left in Wu Yun's account for new equipment and duty cars. I pretended to forget that I had originally offered 100 million, and the police were happy to accept. Sun Yulei and I left the station, and I decided to treat my friends to a celebratory meal. We headed to a simple hot pot restaurant near Jiangnan University of Technology for a casual dinner. Even though it wasn't a luxury meal, the atmosphere of friendship felt more valuable than any expensive delicacy. The group was shocked when they found out I actually bought the company and transferred it to Sun Yuli. Sun was overwhelmed, barely believing the share certificates were real. He was almost afraid to touch the documents. I decided to go a step further and split the shares among my 3 friends so they wouldn't be employees. They were hesitant, feeling they weren't qualified to run a company, but I shut their doubts down quickly. I told them I would hire professional managers to guide them, and as long as they studied, they would grow. I made it clear that I still held the final say, and they would have to answer to me. As we toasted to our future, Sun Yuli brought up something I had mentioned before about NMG. He asked if I was joking about owning half of the cattle and sheep in the NMG region. I told him I wasn't joking. My family actually contracts 2/3 of the pastures in that entire area. Essentially, the vast majority of the livestock that NMG handles actually belongs to my family fortune. After sorting things out with my roommate, I finally felt a sense of relief wash over me. I really wanted to head back to Suzhou to see Lu Yiyao, but her graduation exams were coming up. I didn't want to be a distraction, so we settled for daily video calls to keep our connection strong. Just as I was winding down for the night, my phone buzzed with a call from Wang Ling. He started by teasing me about how I've basically turned the entire city of Gusu upside down recently. I told him it was necessary to show the world the true power and beauty of Chinese culture. We traded a few jabs, as usual, until he finally stopped playing around and got to the point. To my surprise, the wealthy young Master Wang actually wanted to borrow money from me. He explained that the pandemic had hit the film industry hard, leaving his company in a tight spot. While he had plenty of assets, his actual working capital was running dangerously low. He wasn't just looking for a bailout though, he had a vision for a massive new project. Wang Ling had secured the rights to adapt The Three-Body Problem, a legendary masterpiece of science fiction. I knew the work well from high school and agreed it was the peak of domestic sci-fi. The copyright alone cost $20 million, but a high-quality production would require billions for special effects. Since I am practically desperate to spend my inheritance, I decided to give him $10 billion right away. He offered me a share of the box office profits, but I turned it down completely. I joked that this wasn't an investment, but rather a form of poverty alleviation for him. We arranged to meet the next day at the high-end Fico Hotel to discuss the shooting plan. When I arrived, I noticed the hotel was strangely packed for a weekday afternoon. Wang Ling told me the buzz was about a Chinese entrepreneur who bought lunch with the world's richest man. The lunch had been auctioned for a staggering sum, making the whole city curious. I was genuinely confused. I mean, aren't I the richest man in the world? I certainly didn't auction any lunch. I was chatting with Wang Ling when he brought up the world's richest man. I honestly hadn't been paying attention lately. He mentioned someone named Borade. I was confused, asking if Bezos, the guy with the online store, was still number 1. Wang Ling nearly spit out his tea. He told me Borade had just surged to the top of the Forbes list. Apparently, his tech stocks skyrocketed, making his company worth nearly $2 trillion. He had officially overtaken the online shop owner. But the weirdest part was his new business model. He was actually selling dinner quotas to people wanting his investment secrets. Wang Ling told me the starting price for a meal was $500 million, with some paying over $1 billion. I couldn't believe it. To me, spending that much on a meal sounded like a waste. I would rather buy pork ribs. We happened to be at the very restaurant where Borade was eating. The owner had even tripled the food prices today. It was a room full of entrepreneurs worth hundreds of millions, all desperate to steal a few tips from the man. Suddenly, a Rolls-Royce pulled up outside. A man in his 60s stepped out, surrounded by a frenzy of flashing cameras. That was Borade. Beside him was Song Ming-Shang, a powerful venture capitalist who had paid a fortune for this meeting. Song was incredibly humble, treating Borade like a god. Borade seemed to love every second of the attention and prestige. I could see right through him. He wasn't there to mentor anyone, he was just putting on a show for the world. Wang Ling joked that I should just show my bank balance to crush Borade's ego in a matter of seconds. I just laughed. I prefer staying low-key. If the world knew I was the real richest man, I could never go out. As we were laughing, Borade happened to glance over at us. His expression shifted from arrogance to complete bewilderment. He froze, staring at me as if he had seen a ghost or someone legendary. He actually started trotting toward my table. The man who just sold $1 billion lunch stopped right in front of me and asked if he could have dinner with me. I was just standing there when Borade suddenly invited me to dinner. The shift in his tone was absolutely jarring. One moment he was arrogant, and the next his eyes were filled with a strange, almost fanatical level of excitement. The people around us were baffled. They wondered if we knew each other or if my elders had some connection. I told them it was my first time meeting him, but the crowd didn't believe me. All eyes shifted to me. Someone recognized me as Zhang Menglong. Suddenly, the media remembered how I bought Weibo just to impress a girl. The room buzzed with energy. The world's richest man was ignoring everyone else just to invite me to lunch. Poor Zhang Menglong was devastated. He was supposed to be the star of the day, but he was suddenly irrelevant. Borode didn't even care. He had his translator offer Song double the money just to get him out of the way. Even with millions on the line, Song couldn't complain. Borode held far too much power over his listed company. The internet was exploding. Viewers speculated that my family might be the secret shareholders behind the massive Podak group. I looked at Borode and asked if he actually knew me. He replied in careful Chinese, confirming my identity. When I mentioned my grandfather, Zhang Mo, Borode actually burst into tears. He looked like he found a long-lost relative. He offered $1 billion just for a single meal with me. The entire restaurant gasped in utter disbelief. I tried to stay cool. I told him I don't just eat with anyone, even if they are the richest man. He finally explained everything. It turns out my grandfather provided the startup capital that built his entire global empire. To the world, Borode is a genius, but to my grandfather, he was just a bankrupt ghost who needed help. I couldn't believe my ears. Borode, the richest man in the world, just dropped a bombshell on a live broadcast. He claimed that my grandfather was the one who provided his very first startup capital many years ago. The internet went wild. Everyone was questioning how my family could be so mysterious yet so incredibly powerful. To the world, Borode is the king of wealth, but it turns out he was created by my grandfather. Borode's attitude was shocking. He refused a luxurious chair, choosing a broken wooden one just to be in my presence. Even my friend Wang was starstruck, feeling honored just to be toasted by the world's wealthiest man. I realized my family had kept this a secret. Even Hong Yi never mentioned this part of my grandfather's life. Curious, I asked Borode to tell me more. He spoke of my grandfather with a level of reverence that was humbling. He recalled the last century, when he was a struggling stock speculator with almost no capital or stability. Then he mentioned the global financial crisis. I knew it from history books, but I never knew the truth. Borode revealed something insane. That entire economic collapse was actually my grandfather's calculated masterpiece. The goal wasn't money, it was about recovering national treasures that had been stolen from my country long ago. My grandfather used his terrifying resources to trigger hyperinflation in several countries within just a few days. By paralyzing half the world's economy in a week, he forced the return of those lost cultural relics. I sat there in shock. My grandfather wasn't just rich, he was a legend who reshaped the world for his country. I have always known about the great financial crises of the past, the kind that destroy economies for decades. I remember reading about milk rivers and ruined fields, a catastrophic cycle of unemployment and total social collapse. But there was always a mystery. Why did China and its close allies survive those disasters so easily? It felt like an invisible hand was protecting them, shortening a century of technological gaps into just a few decades. Now, I am realizing the shocking truth. All of that was actually orchestrated by my own grandfather. The thought is terrifying. To control the global economy on that scale requires a force beyond my imagination. Borode explained that it started with a global shortage of raw materials, specifically a brutal cut in crude oil supplies. Capitalists overproduced while purchasing power vanished, creating a vicious cycle that triggered a total economic eruption. While I remember some of this from high school politics, the reality Borode describes is far more sinister. He told me that 90% of crude oil supplies to developed nations were cut off almost overnight. Even worse, every major bank in the world was hit with massive withdrawal orders at the exact same time. In just weeks, the world's cash flow was drained. $10 trillion vanished from banks in a $5 trillion GDP world. I could barely process those numbers. Was my grandfather really the one who pulled the strings behind the curtain? Beside me, Wang was stunned. As an economics expert, he knew exactly how impossible this should have been. We wonder how such a nightmare finally ended. I didn't know much, but Wang remembered the strange clues. He recalled lost cultural relics wrapped in red silk and ghost ships appearing along the coasts, filled with treasures. That was the bargaining chip. My grandfather used those relics to end the crisis and restore the global supply chain. I asked Borode how he even came to know my grandfather during such a chaotic and desperate time. He confessed that he was a failed trader on Wall Street, hunted by creditors after losing everything. My grandfather found him and offered a lifeline simply because Borode was, in his words, pleasing to the eye. Borode laughed bitterly at that, but he became the guide who led my grandfather into the Wall Street Bond Center. In only 3 days, my grandfather systematically destroyed the entire currency market, crashing projects with a single order. By the end, he controlled Wall Street entirely, capable of devaluing or appreciating any currency at his will. It was not just wealth. It was the absolute power of the market, wielded by a man I am only just beginning to understand. The live broadcast was absolutely chaotic. People were scrolling through the chat, unable to believe the revelations they were hearing. Borade was explaining how my grandfather essentially controlled the global economy, making trillions of dollars simply vanish into thin air. The viewers were skeptical at first, but when they checked the historical records, every single date aligned perfectly with the truth. My friend Wang Ling was so shocked that he actually dislocated his jaw. He was completely floored by the sheer scale. Reporters were scrambling, realizing this was the story of the century. The news was spreading across the entire country in minutes. Then Borade mentioned his startup capital. My grandfather had given him an account to manage as a simple thank you gift. In today's money, that gift was worth $13 billion. To my grandfather, that was just a bit of pocket change. Wang Ling looked at me with pure envy, even shamelessly offering to be my grandson just to get a piece of that wealth. Borade asked if my grandfather was still around. I had to admit that I had never even met the man in my life. The crowd outside the restaurant was growing, so I decided it was time to wrap up the interview and leave quietly. Before leaving, Borade made a shocking offer. He told me his current trillion-dollar fortune was always mine if I wanted it. I just smiled and told him to keep the change. After all, a few trillion is nothing compared to the family legacy. The internet went wild again. Some call it arrogance, but for me, it is just the reality of being born into this family. After Parati left, the media went wild. They were practically breathing down our necks trying to get a scoop on us. To escape the chaos, Zhang Menglong and I quickly retreated to a private box for some peace and quiet. I tried to play it cool, acting respectful to Zhang Menglong because I was starting to realize just how rich he is. I previously thought his wealth was a sesame seed, but it turns out the real situation is more like a giant watermelon. We talked about what Parati revealed. The Zhang family's influence on global economics is honestly terrifying and almost unbelievable. If the world found out that a single family could trigger a global crisis, historians and economists would lose their minds. Zhang Menglong didn't care about the critics. He even joked about causing another financial crisis if people didn't praise him. I was sweating just thinking about it. I told him to warn me first so I could sell my stocks in time. Then we got down to business. I showed him my casting plan for our movie on my tablet computer. Since regulations limit actor pay, I had 4 million yuan to spend. I chose the most popular stars to guarantee a hit. Zhang Menglong hated it. He called it a talent show rather than a movie and criticized the lack of acting skill. He believes that popularity means nothing if the performance is bad, especially for a hardcore sci-fi film like this one. I told him I had already negotiated with Wang Zihan, a top star, for the lead role of Wang Miao. Zhang Menglong was appalled. He said Wang Zihan wasn't fit for the lead and suggested he play a minor role instead. I warned him about the massive contract penalty for breaking the deal, but Zhang just shrugged it off effortlessly. To him, a bad actor is like a piece of mouse droppings that ruins the entire pot of porridge. He took my tablet and wrote his own list, filled with veteran actors known for their incredible acting skill. These actors weren't as famous as they used to be, but Zhang was willing to pay them massive salaries. I was shocked by the budget he was throwing around. He basically decided to become the discipline committee of the industry. I asked how he planned to market the movie without popular stars to draw in the crowds for the box office. He mentioned the Kana special effects team, the most legendary and exclusive VFX house in the entire world. I was stunned. I asked if he had managed to invite them to work on our project. He looked at me and calmly revealed the truth. He didn't just invite them, he bought the entire company.